Welcome to this Valley of Words session on Wild Himalaya. I have with me author Stephen Alter, well-known author, Missouri born, and a hands-on author who writes when goes where he writes about. And Steve, tell me, uh, when you wrote Wild Himalaya 2, 3 years ago, when you went up there, when you were researching the book, uh, what did you? Well, let's take Sikkim for example. What did you find there, especially in Sikkim?
Well, thank you, Ganesh. It's a pleasure to be here at the Valley of Words Festival. Um, my book, Wild Himalaya, was, I think, many years in the making. I say I've been writing it all my life because I essentially compiled stories and experiences that I had while traveling through the mountains from when I was a very young boy until now. And Sikkim is a good example. I'd heard about the rhododendrons of Sikkim for years and read about them in J.D. Hooker's accounts and others. And I really wanted to visit those valleys and see the rhododendrons in bloom. I had the opportunity to do a trek up to Gochila while the rhododendrons were in bloom. And as you pass through each altitudinal zone, you see the different species changing, the different colors, the different sizes, the different leaves, foliage. And it was a marvelous experience to be able to see that variety of rhododendrons in the northeastern part of the Himalaya.
Fantastic. And I remember reading your book, and that there's a place where you describe these cicadas. There's a description of the cicadas, the Himalayan cicadas, and we have with us. I ask you to do that, Steve. I come back to you in a second. We have with us in this virtual session Vivek Sarkar, a research scholar who's doing research on the Himalayan cicadas. And welcome to the Valley of Words session on Wild Himalaya, Vivek. Welcome once again to this session. And Steve, tell me about that. Yeah, that description you have. That's the first one I read in words, that description of the cicadas, cry of the cicada, if you can call it that. Yeah.
Well, I think Vivek can tell us as an expert much more about them. But one of the interesting things that I found in my research was that I was studying the drumming in Garhwal. And through some research that my brother had done, I discovered that some of the drum beats echo and imitate sounds from wildlife, from birds, from other creatures. And one of the creatures was the cicada, and it makes perfectly good sense because it has a percussive, repetitive sound. And that rum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum sound that the drummers use replicates the call of the cicada. Now, Vivek can tell us which cicada it is and a little bit more about the biology, I'm sure, and distribution of those creatures.
Come, tell us, come.
Thank you, sir.
Join
so, in this case, the drumming cicada that you are talking about, we don't have a common name. Okay, so maybe now onward we should call it a drumming cicada. There's a good opportunity now that I know the story. Now there are cicadas, as you know, like they're called all the time, and it's kind of a background noise. So people intend to they sometimes like they hear, but it's more like a white noise. So you hear them, but you don't really put your mind into it. The special thing about this drumming cicada is it's a crepuscular cicada. It only calls in the evening. Okay, and it calls so loudly for only about an hour right after the sunset. So this cicada is called Platylomia brevis. Okay, this is one of those cicada. In Southeast Asia, we have 6 o'clock cicada or the alarm clock cicada. There it calls in 6 o'clock in the morning. Okay, here we have evening calling cicada, as I said. And so, yeah, it
Wow.
is described from northern India, Himalayas. But since its discovery in late 1800, we knew practically nothing about it till very recent. Okay, they have been calling all these years, in a particular time of the year. But it's just that being loudest, we still, at least the scientific community, we could not find them. Okay, we didn't know where to search them. But when it comes to the cultural aspect of Himalaya, the people who are living here, they made the cicadas, the natural biodiversity, part of their life, part of their tradition, part of their culture. Okay, so perhaps
Mm,
now it's our duty to bridge the gap, you know, between the
mm.
local community and explore this traditional ecological knowledge, and to bring it in mainstream science. So yeah, so my work is largely
Thank you.
focusing on that. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Perfect, Vivek. And Steve, to get back to you, uh, what do you think is going to be the changes that we see, the climatic changes we see? I mean, apart from what it'll do to this great biodiversity that you have talked about in your book, Wild Himalaya, this biodiversity, what do you see the future, the changes that will come with climate change, Steve?
Well, I think that climate change obviously is the greatest environmental threat that we're facing right now. There are many, many
Yeah,
threats that we can talk about, but when we're talking about environmental change, I think right now the way in which the climate, the warming of the earth is accelerating a lot of change that was already there. The truth of it is that, 10,000 years ago, the last ice age ended. And at that point, the ice and snow was at least 2,000 meters lower than it is today. And over these 10,000 years, that ice has slowly been retreating. And what we see as glaciers at a place like Gangotri or at the Solukhumbu Glacier in Nepal, that's the
yeah,
remnants of
yeah,
that ice age. And what we're seeing now is that has, over 10,000 years, has very gradually receded. But we,
yeah.
through pollution, through release of greenhouse gases and things like that, are now accelerating that change. So it's important to understand that the Himalaya have always been changing, but it's suddenly as if
Yeah.
somebody has put their foot on the accelerator, and it's
Yeah.
going to happen much more quickly. And we see it in the distribution of species, we see it in migration patterns, we see it in the changes in foliage in different altitudinal zones, and so on and so forth. So I think of it really as slow and gradual change that is now suddenly accelerating, and we're going to lose a lot of species. We're going to have places that had a certain temperate climate that will suddenly become a whole lot warmer. That ice in the glaciers is going to recede. And ultimately, when that ice disappears, as it will in many of these glaciers, the water will stop flowing. And that in itself
Oh,
is perhaps the
oh.
most frightening thought of all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The vanishing of water. And Vivek, what do you think? Like in in 1899, you were saying there were, Frederick Young in 1927 was collecting cicadas in Badraj. Then you have McKinnon, who you tell, you say were collecting cicadas, just a little distance from in
Yes.
Missouri at the other end of town. And what do you think? Do you think it's going to destroy the cicadas too eventually, or this climate change, or what do you think will happen, Vivek? Very unfair question. It's from the future. So,
Yes.
what do you think will happen?
Yeah.
Unfair question, but
Thanks for
anyway,
this
short,
question.
Vivek.
The the thing is, see, you need to understand that, as Stephen sir rightly mentioned, see, Himalaya is ever changing. That's the only constant thing about Himalayas, that it will change. But we just
Yeah,
accelerated the process. Okay, in the urbanization or the recent development or whatever we speak of, it's basically accelerated
yeah,
the thing, and that changed a lot of the micro habitat. Okay, not only the
yeah,
climatic aspect but also the habitat and all. Okay, so for an example,
Yeah.
when Mackinnon's or his subordinates sampled this area, it must have been very different from what we see now. For an example, there is a village right at the bottom of Mussoorie, Chamasari. It's the other side of Jharipani. So that is a
Yeah.
technicality of the species. You know, but in last 4 years when I was visiting this area, I could not find anything. I just could not find that cicada at all, despite serving it for 4 years. But then again, this year, maybe due to the lockdown, I went to the other side of the this Mussoorie range. This is that Aglar Valley, and I happened to find it.
Uh,
You know, because
yeah.
Aglar Valley, this side, this slope did not see as much as development that the Mussoorie facing side have seen. So this is just one thing,
Uh,
one tiny example. Okay, so we
yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
there is a term.
Yeah.
There is a term called the crisis of nameless extinction. Okay, so we don't know what all we are losing. Okay, they'll go even before we could describe them or discover them. So that is a concern. That is a bigger concern for me. Okay, and cicadas are just
Yeah.
one thing. There are dragonfly, damselfly, butterflies, and many other insects which basically run the world from behind the curtain. We don't get to see them,
Yeah.
but they are actually
Yeah.
the keystones. You know, so once their
Yeah.
habitat goes, you don't know what's gonna happen. We might just have a
Yeah.
forest which is entirely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Steve, yet we talk, how do we balance what do you think is the balance, Steve? The optimum balance between progress and between development, and where would you think would be the balance? I mean, the basic one of my theories is that we are the ultimate plague. We are taking over the every all other species. We are driving them to extinction to some extent. And what do you feel, Steve, would be the ideal balance between development on one hand and this like the pilgrim tourism, for example? How much can these mountains bear? That's what my
Well,
question is, how much.
if if you're asking me
Yeah.
what's the ideal situation for the world at large, and if I'm not thinking in a self-serving way as a species, our extinction would solve a huge number of problems altogether. But obviously, we're not wishing that upon ourselves. I think that
Yeah.
what has to happen on many different levels is that we manage that development, we manage those changes that we ourselves are bringing upon this environment as best we can. And we must make sure that there are whole areas of the Himalaya that are untouched by human presence. Now, we have wildlife sanctuaries, we have national parks that
Yeah.
have been established.
Gee,
That's a
gee,
good thing.
gee, gee.
There are obviously
Mm.
issues in terms of access to that forest cover, whether it's from migrant
Gee.
communities or people living on the periphery. But at the same time, I
Yeah.
think we have to have areas that are completely untouched. And that means I, who enjoy trekking, who enjoys going up into the mountains, I must restrict my own journeys into those areas, because it's the only way we're going to be able to protect these little pockets that are left there. And whether it's in
Yeah.
Arunachal Pradesh,
I-
whether it's here in Garhwal or Himachal Pradesh, each area has to be protected. One of the things that I think most people don't realize about the Himalaya is that they usually think of the subcontinent of India there, and they think of it as just a wall across the top, the northern section. But in fact, the Himalaya are an arc. And so in the eastern Himalaya, the latitude is much lower. And then it arcs up towards the west, it heads further north. So you have much greater
Yeah.
biodiversity in the northeastern section. And as you move further west and north, there is less diversity there. So it's very important that we preserve areas all along that arc, not just, the Himalaya itself is not just a uniform just a single environment. It is made up of so many environments. And as Vivek said just a little while ago, there are these microclimates that exist. Sometimes just the one side of a hill has its own specific climate, its own specific ecology, and we must recognize that. I mean, scientists like Vivek are the ones who are going to tell us that this is an area that needs to be protected because it is unique. And we must listen to those scientists and say we're not going to bulldoze a road through that particular passage because it is a particularly unique area. We'll take our road around it, we'll go over it, or we won't build a road at all. So that, I think, is perhaps the most important lesson that I've learned over the years, is we must listen to the scientists and then manage our progress and development accordingly.
Vivek, to get back, thanks, Steve. Thank you so much. To get back to you, Vivek, I remember you telling me the other day that, for example, the cicadas are the least studied of insects, least studied, and yet they're the most vociferous. I mean, right from, I think, from July to the almost now, you can hear them. They're there, and different species, different calls. I mean, tell us something about it, Vivek, about what you've been found so far.
Okay, so before even we come to cicadas, let's let's talk about natural acoustic. Okay, so like the symphony of nature, right? So in this natural orchestra, there are just four major players. Okay, one is this birds. We all know that. Another one is this frogs and toads, right? The third one are the grasshoppers and cricket. Okay, and the fourth one are cicadas, and that's about it. In a terrestrial system, here in the aquatic system, we have whales, dolphins, and so on. But in a terrestrial system, this is it. Okay. Yes. So in this, in case of entomofauna, like the insects, as I said, there is this grasshopper and cricket. That's one group, and then we have the cicadas. But in case of grasshoppers and crickets, they produce sound, as you know, either from their wings or from their legs. So in their case, those are not the primary, function of those organs. Leg and wings are for locomotion, right? But yet they just produce sound from it. In case of cicadas, they are very unique in a way because they have their own, organ to produce sound. Okay, and every species have a different sound. Okay, so now when it comes to the conservation aspect of it, the beauty of cicadas is that they are good indicator. And unlike butterflies, odonets, also like dragonfly, damselfly, or any other natural indicator, cicadas, you just can go there. You don't have to spot them. You don't have to visually go and spot them. You just stand in one place, you keep your ears open, and you get to hear them. That's about it. Okay.
I've heard from friends that you're legendary in terms of being able to locate them yourself. Yeah, I believe you can. You were last seen climbing a tree 40 feet up to grab one single cicada. I think you're unique.
Yes.
I can't climb 5 feet.
And the sad part, however, for Indian cicadas are that we know that we have the highest genetic diversity of cicadas in the world. Okay, yet Indian cicadas are the most understudied cicadas in the world again. Okay, we in the year 2016 we came up with a monograph to consolidate all the cicadas that we have in Indian region. Okay, and now we then only got to know that India actually have the highest genetic diversity. Till now we didn't know. Okay, so it's kind of tragic that they are the loudest yet they are the unknown. Okay, so often I say that the only because you are loudest doesn't mean you are completely explode and all. Okay, in case of cicadas, yes, that has been a tragedy that we didn't know. And coming to what Stephen has mentioned, that along the Himalayan ranges, we have diversity. We have very different diversity. Okay, the eastern Himalayas, especially Naga Hills, Nagaland, and Arunachal Pradesh, we have an entirely different sort of system, different sort of diversity. When it comes to the Sikkim and Nepal
Uh-huh.
and Bhutan, Northern Bengal, it's
Yeah.
again entirely different. As we enter this, Western Himalaya from Uttarakhand and part of Western Nepal, the diversity entirely changes. It's because, as Stephen mentioned, it's different altitude. Due to different altitude, different climate regime. Due to different climate regime, there are
Okay.
different, plant that has evolved, and due to different plant
Okay.
diversity, we have very different insect diversity and very different habitat. Okay, so yes, it's Dehradun also stands very different and very unique. Okay, compared to other part, we get cicadas here which are not found westward, like in Himachal Pradesh and all. We don't have cicadas we don't get in Nepal and east. So yes, in that way, Dehradun is quite unique. And we also had the privilege of Shivaliks. Okay, one extra valley that we got, which helped the many life form to evolve independently, and that's why we don't get those life from anywhere else. It's just endemic here. So in that way, we are very privileged
Fantastic.
and lucky.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We are very fortunate.
I would say that one of the things that anyone who has spent time in the Himalaya will appreciate is the diversity. And Vivek is talking about the diversity of species, but there is
Yeah.
diversity on all levels. Of course, there's a diversity of climate, there's a diversity of people. The cultural diversity of the Himalaya is incredible. When you move from east to west, you change languages, you change traditions,
Yeah.
you change ethnicities as well. And I think one of the things that fascinates me as you move through the Himalaya is the way in which the stories that each culture tells reflect the natural history of that particular region. So if you're in Arunachal Pradesh, each ethnic community will have its own set of stories, myths, legends that will explain
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
natural world that they are so close to and that they live in. And even
Yeah.
when I traveled right to the western edge of the Himalaya, when I was near Nanga Parbat, just at the foot of Nanga Parbat, there were again a whole different set of stories that were being told that interpreted that particular environment. And I think the thing that I find interesting as a writer, as a traveler, is when sometimes those stories overlap. And when you can hear a bird call in one place, we have, for instance, the Indian cuckoo, which in our part of Uttarakhand and in Nepal is its call is interpreted as kafal pako. It has that call, and that is interpreted as kafal pako. But when I went to Darjeeling, I was sitting at a tea estate, and someone said it's not kafal pako, it's orange pico. Orange pico is the the kind of tea that is grown there. And then I was sitting there as the sun went down. One of the tea planters there, he leaned over and he said, "It's not orange pico. It's one more bottle, one more bottle." And so each of these calls, you have it interpreted in different ways. And I'm sure that cicadas in Arunachal Pradesh have all kinds of stories attached to them. And I think these stories, to me, are very, very important because they become a way in which we can promote conservation. We can interest young people with those stories. If you just tell them this is such and such a bird, they're not going to be that interested in it. But if you can tell a story about that bird, if you can say this is a bar-headed geese that flies over the top of Everest twice a year and survives altitudes and weather conditions that human beings can't survive, suddenly that bird comes to life for a child, for not just a child, for anybody, as far as that goes. And I think those stories are something that we all have to use as we try to persuade the rest of our species that these are environments that need to be protected and preserved.
Yeah. And Vivek, you're the
Yes,
cicada man. I mean, I remember you all my life, all my living days as a cicada
yes,
man. And no, it's a fascinating because all my life I never really, I've heard cicadas all my life. It's a sound that has fascinated me because they're so hard to find. I mean, you find them easily, I'm told. But
I
uh,
actually
is
it is it's
yeah, please.
yeah. So like I just want to continue from like what Stephen has said, that you can associate better when you tell the story to the common people, and then
Yeah.
that becomes the point of interest. Then out of curiosity you pursue it, and then like it turns out something really beautiful, right? So I have a small story to tell, basically. Okay, so see, I'm from northern part of Bengal. Okay, and I'm a Bengali, so we all get this Durga Puja vacation. Okay, and it has been a sort of a culture and tradition that during this puja vacation, most of the Bengali family would go to the hills to just to like feel the nature. So in my case, this time when you go to the forest, you get to hear a bell. Okay, it's like a temple bell. It exactly like a temple bell, and it just a ringing, continuous ringing that you hear in the forest of North Bengal. So I have a very strong association with this bell sound and this feeling of puja vacation. So
Ah,
as I grew up, and nobody knew what it was. Even the local there or the forest official, all of them would say, "Oh, that's ghanti poka." Ghanti means the bell, and poka means in Bengali the insect. So ring insect. Okay, oh, it was nice, ring insect. But only in the later stage, like when I started studying the cicada, somehow coincidentally, I got to know the species. Okay, it is present throughout the foothills of Himalaya. Okay, and now I know that species was Dundubia hastata. So like when I wrote my first paper alone on cicadas, I mentioned I had to write an abstract in Bengali on the native language. So there I have mentioned, okay, due to this presence of this this ringing, all the cicadas in Bengal are called Ghontipoka. Okay. Similarly, like in the childhood, you would hear a comb scraping sound, which would be the time when we would all the kids would be having this summer vacation. Summer vacation comb scraping sound coming from my mango tree at the backyard of the house. So that's a very fond memory of my childhood. Okay, in only in the recent year, in the past 2 years, when I got to see the cicada, when I collected and studied them, studied their call, I got to know the cicada which I've been hearing from my childhood happens to be a new record for India. Okay, the paper came out this year. Okay, so it was
uh,
to my surprise that the species which is there, like from I don't know how many years, that is something which would be a new report for India. And not only that, that cicada I have worked in Meghalaya. Okay, all three hills: Garo Hills, Khasi Hills, and Jaintia Hills. Apparently, the Garo people
yeah.
there, they have association of that cicada in their folklore, and whenever this cicada start calling, that is the time when they have to start their shifting cultivation, the jhoom they call it. Okay, and so see, there are a lot of this sort of beats. There are a lot of natural history. There are not lot of like ecological knowledge which are running in generations, but it's just that we didn't know. We as a scientist had no clue. Okay, we did not even like put any interest in it. Now that we are, now we can connect the like dots better. And now when I
Got,
tell this
yeah.
story in a like school in Khasi Hills or Garo Hills or somewhere here, or even in northern Bengal, they can associate it just like that. And the interest is already there. Do you see it now? So, like they can associate it better. The curiosity is intrigued. And so I know out of, like say like 100 students that I'm telling the story, if one picks it up and, like do something, well, I think, like the subject gets its justice.
Steve, I think it's about time you started, wrote a Garhwali tale on a tale relevant for Garhwal and the Himalayas in general, on the cicadas one of these days, on the sound and
I
create a story around it. Weave a story, you're a storyteller.
No. I think well, I'll sit with Vivek for several weeks and hear all of his stories and perhaps put those together.
Yeah,
But no, I think these stories
yeah,
are so important for us to preserve along with the species themselves. And I think that one wonderful theme that you'll find in so many of the stories about different species is the issue of time or the question of time. You talk about how the cicadas will sing for only 15 minutes or 1 hour or whatever it may be at a particular time of day. And I think
yeah,
that I know when I was traveling in Sikkim, I heard a number of stories from the Lepcha people, the Lepcha traditions, and they have a very, very rich tradition of identifying birds, identifying different species. I mean, their taxonomy, I think, predates Linnaeus and has a lot of very, very, very specific details to it. For instance, they always say that the whistling thrush, the blue whistling thrush, is the first bird to sing. It also, they say, that it cleans the sacred lakes near in sacred areas of the mountains by
fascinating.
picking the
Yeah,
leaves or the sticks off the surface, and so on and so forth. There are those. The one story, if you'll allow me to tell one more story, which I love, which also comes from the Lepcha tradition, is anyone who has trekked in Sikkim or in Arunachal Pradesh or Bhutan knows that the biggest nuisance are the leeches, and you can't take two steps without a leech sticking onto you. And the one of
yeah,
my companions who was with me, he said, "Well, I'll tell you this story about there was a demon long ago, and then a certain deity was called forward, and that deity fought with the demon and ultimately defeated the demon and chopped that demon up into tiny, tiny pieces and scattered him in the forest. And the leeches are the remnants of that demon, and they
even
suck our blood even till today. And when you think about that
fascinating.
and you see those leeches along the path, you think to yourself, yes, that demon was cut up and he's lying in wait for me as I trek along this path. So these
True
stories,
stories, true
they don't
stories.
necessarily inform us in a scientific way, but they help bring that environment to life
Stories.
and give us a new appreciation for what we're seeing.
Yeah.
G. Huh, Vivek? So you were telling us
Yes.
the fixed time call cicada. What was that fixed
So
time
in
call? The one I call him. I named it the fixed time call cicada that rings every day at at one fixed time and for a fixed
same
time.
time.
You were telling me something, right?
Yes.
What was that? What, yeah,
So
please tell us
here
that
the
tale
one you
again.
get it is called alarm clock cicada.
Alarm clock cicada. Okay.
Yes.
What does it
So, but like
do?
this alarm clock cicada also like all the way from Myanmar till Western Himalaya, there are many alarm clock cicada. The features are same, but the
Yeah.
species gets replaced. Okay, because like there's sheer diversity. So yes, well, when it comes to the folklores and other thing of cicadas, the visual part is
Yeah.
not really the forte, because cicadas have
Yeah.
evolved in
Yeah.
such a way
Yeah.
that like that you can hear them, but you can barely spot them. Okay, because like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
understood also if you look at it. See, they are easy food to bird because they announce, oh look, we are here, we are here. So it would be quite easy for bird no to go just pick it up because they make sound. So they evolved in such a way that
Ah,
like they won't be easily spotted by any insectivore or like ecologist or cicada worker like me. So that makes our work
sorry
bit
to
difficult.
interrupt you, Vivek. Vivek, if I can interrupt
Yeah.
you, I was told
Yes.
at the National Center that
Mm-hmm.
there are some cicadas that is, if it's you can tell me whether it's true or false. Is that there's
Yeah.
some cicadas that that strum up in the day. They're poisonous to birds, and so the birds don't go at them. And then there are these that strum up at after sundown because the bats don't get them in that window, no, between the two. Is it true that?
Yes. It is true.
Okay, okay.
Apparently, this was not known. Okay, so this is very recently. We just submitted the paper. There is a genus called
Yeah.
Mata. Okay, so the first Mata was described from Darjeeling. Okay, the second Mata
Huh.
was described from Bhutan. Okay, again Himalayan species. Okay, and it has been almost 100 years since then. So all over the world, and it's a Asian genus. Okay, the Mata.
Yeah,
So we had only two
yeah,
species, and that's about it. Okay, so when I started working in Meghalaya in 2017, again, I have been working in Meghalaya for a
yeah,
while from almost 2013 onward. But in
yeah,
2017,
yeah.
I quit my job. I said, like, this is the only thing I'm gonna do for a year. So when I was working there, in one evening, I got three species of mata. Okay. Later, after studying them,
Wow.
we got to know all of them were new to science. Okay, so the paper would be coming soon, maybe in few months. Okay, so I was studying them, and
Excellent.
although the known species from Darjeeling or Bhutan, there's just this specimen and nothing else. Okay, so we didn't know what time of the year they emerge, how is the call, what is the behavior. We knew practically nothing. But I had the opportunity to observe them in Meghalaya. As I was observing them, I found out they won't call. They won't call till the bird activity goes down. And as the bird activity goes down, they start calling. Okay, and they call rapidly. Rampantly means you can even go touch them, still
Oh,
it won't
so
stop calling.
loud. Yeah.
Okay, so they're very, very, desperate. And right after that, obviously, like as the bird activity goes down and the sun also goes down, then the bat activity starts, right? So there's this, horse
Very
to nose
sharp.
bat
Yeah.
and all. So they will be, like coming and just devouring them. Okay, and this species is not exactly gregarious, but somewhat gregarious. They will be in a nearby bushes and plants. So one species
Huh.
gets eaten, two individual gets eaten, like that. Once four, five individual gets eaten, and every time a bat catches them, they'll make this, warning call or sort of, distress call. And
Wow.
that is a kind of a precursor that, like the other cicadas will also stop calling. Okay. So although, like every day there are,
Like
say,
a
like, 50
symphony.
cicadas in that landscape gets eaten, but
Yeah.
they compromise themselves to, warn other in a way. If you think of it, it's a very cool way to surviving, you know. And then, so
Wow.
that's what happened. And see, the time also get restricted.
Wow.
See, one or two individual, if they get, like really boost up and start calling early, it's a natural selection sort of. If they start calling early, the bird will pick them. If they start calling late, the bats will pick them. So that's what, in the thousands and thousands years of evolution, they came in, they restrict their calling in that manner, in that time. So that's how basically evolution works. Okay, that's how natural selection works.
Wow.
I wonder,
Steve, don't
Vivek,
we should.
whether you'll. I wonder whether you'll discover mimicry amongst cicadas as well, because I mean, one of the interesting patterns in nature is this pattern of mimicry. And butterflies, of
Yes,
course, we know a great deal about the
yes,
mimicry that's there. Birds even mimic each other, and
yes,
there are certain reasons for that. Um, uh,
yes,
Human beings mimic each other as well, not always for the
yes.
best reasons. But I think that it would be fascinating with cicadas and other insect life whether there is a mimicry going on there as well to protect themselves in some way.
So yeah, thanks for this, question. So I have a very interesting, observation here. In there is a group of cicada, okay, who are very
Yeah.
brightly colored. We also get them in Himalayan ranges from March to April. Few individuals survive all the way till June, so they are bright, sulfur yellow in color. Okay, so this cicada is called Sulfogyna sulfurea. Now the thing about it, as I mentioned, like a few times back, that they are evolved in such a way that birds or other things can't really see them. But if you are fluorescent green or fluorescent yellow in color, it's quite easy for the birds to see, right? So there is another thing called
Yeah.
aposematic cicada. Okay, so they are poisonous, and they they announce it with the color. Okay, so that is a group of insects who are called aposematic. We have certain birds which are aposematic, like common rose and all. They are bright crimson in color, and they are poisonous, so bird knows. Okay, But and this type of cicada, which are very colorful, slow flying, they are called. There's a term that I think Michael Bullard, the person who studied the cicadas of Thailand, he have coined, that is butterfly cicada. They are visually, they are aesthetically pleasing, right? So in this group there is one more cicada, like, which mimics, apparently, and they mimic the day flying poisonous moth. Okay, so they'll fly very
Wow.
slowly, those day flying poisonous moth, and the birds will think, oh, it's also a moth, so they won't even approach. Okay, so we have one very beautiful cicada here in Masuri Hills that you get to see in June and July, all the way till first week of September. That is Polyneura
Ah,
ducalis. Okay, the original type was basically collected from Shimla and parts of Masuri Hills. Okay, so this time we also got that. It's a beautiful cicada, visually stunning, but when it flies, you will be totally and thoroughly think that, and get confused that it's a day flying moth. So that is coming about the visual mimicry. Now, when it comes to the acoustic mimicry, we don't have much of the cases, but maybe, this year we might have stumbled upon something very similar. I'm working on it. It will take some more time and maybe couple more years to establish my theory. But this same
good
cicada,
for you.
as I mentioned, this Sulfogyna sulfurea or sulfur cicada, we got a cicada which emerges right after this Sulfogyna sulfurea dies. Okay. And the call was so similar this time this year. I was like, wait, this is too late for this cicada to be present in this sheer number. So when I spotted it,
To
it
be
turned out to be entirely different with very similar beating. Okay, see, it's very similar call. So we might just have the,
ah,
like, first known case of, acoustic mimicry from India, but I'm working on it, and it would be too early to say that, yes, I got it. Okay, but give me 2 more years. I'll get back to you.
good. We'll catch you on that one, Vivek. Yeah, Steve.
Yes.
Gee. Yeah. Oh, I come, Steve. Tell us another tale
Well, I
from.
once you get me started, then I'll be in trouble because I won't be able to stop. But no,
Um,
I think there's so many. I think one of the interesting things, I just published a book called Feral Dreams, which is a retelling of the Jungle Book, and the Jungle Book is an interesting collection of stories that Kipling put together more than 100 years ago. And
huh.
Kipling himself didn't have that much knowledge of the forests. So there are a number of things there that don't make sense if you're a naturalist, and you wonder, well, where did this name come from? And Mowgli himself, the name Mowgli is a bit of a mystery because Kipling says it means frog. Now, I'm not aware of any language in which, and maybe someone can correct me, but I'm not aware of any language that calls Mowgli, calls a frog Mowgli. But I think what I was talking with someone the other day, in the sense that the story at the heart of Jungle Book is completely absurd, in that a human infant abandoned in the forest wouldn't survive very long. I mean, some predator would pretty quickly finish that child off. And yet it's a very, very potent myth that goes right back to the time of the Sumerian epic Gilgamesh, Romulus and Remus in ancient Rome. And our Mahabharata and Ramayana have so many episodes in the forest where human beings are living in concert with nature, and they have to
Nation.
with
Yeah.
species, including predators in the forest. And I think that myth is a very, very potent myth, not specific to any particular heritage, and yet something that is common to humanity across the globe, is this idea that somehow, if we live in concert with nature, if we live at peace with nature, we ourselves can survive. And at the very heart of it, I think, is this idea that if we don't protect other species, if we don't learn about other species and understand their survival, our survival is at risk. Because the minute, let's say leaf warblers become extinct, then the insects are going to eat all of those leaves, those trees are going to die, and we ourselves are going to be left scavenging for whatever is left. That's a very simple example, a very basic and perhaps
Yeah,
a
yeah,
naive
yeah.
example, but there are so many situations in which our survival depends on the diversity of species. And the diversity of species in the Himalaya is so great and so enormous that we must learn to appreciate that and understand that we have to live in concert with, in peace with these other species, which is the story of Mowgli. It's the story of Lord Ram and Sita in the forest. It's the story of the Pandavas going off into the forest in exile and surviving and then coming back again.
Mm.
So those are the
Mm.
stories I think that we have to, understand on that level. Most people don't think of these myths as stories of nature, but in fact, they are absolutely tied to the natural world.
Um, Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Vivek, I want. Could you please tell us the story on going down to Dehradun and that I'm sorry, it's all been cicadas today, but you're a cicada
No problem.
expert. So tell us that story that you were telling us, me and Steve, about before the session began of the uh, axle cicada. I mean, that is a far out story
Ah,
of how the sound of an axle and the sound of a cicada mimicking it almost. Yeah, you were going somewhere to Dehradun or
yeah.
something. Yeah,
Ac-
tell us.
Actually,
Come, come,
actually,
come.
there's a like a small context to it. That is, anyway, I
Yeah.
came here in Dehradun and joined Wildlife Institute in the year 2015. Okay, by that time I already
Yeah.
started studying cicada, and that was already 3 years I have studied cicada. But after coming here, I was
Uh.
just generally looking at it because there are a lot of cicadas that has been collected from here. But this year there's a person, Max Mold, who happens to be one of the authorities of cicadas globally. Okay, and we all refer to his work. So he wrote a mail saying, "Vivek, you are working in the cicadas of India. Have you ever come across this cicada called Leptosaltria samia?" I said, well, I have something similar. I don't know. There was a species which I photographed in 2016 from Missouri. I sent it, is this the one? He's like, man, I have no clue. Maybe, yeah, there are some similarities, but I'm not sure. But later, I think, figured it out. Oh, it was that other cicada. It's a Terpnosia ganesha, okay, known only from Missouri. Okay, and I was like, okay,
Oh,
this
they
is not it.
named it
And then,
after
yes. Very much. So then like
it.
I have been so earlier this year, like almost all the time I have been looking, because the type locality I know that it was originally collected and described from Missouri, so it has to be somewhere. Okay, but like it was already June, we've already passed June, then it was July, we are about to pass July, and then the August was
Yeah.
about to come and we could not find it. We just could not find it. So I was like, okay, maybe it's a possibility that the slope, the south
On
facing slope of this Missouri hill, it has seen lot of habitat modification, land use, land cover changes. Maybe like it was one of those narrow point and away. We might have just like lost it, or maybe it is in some other part. There are two possibilities. One was we already lost it, it's a local extinction, or what must have happened is somebody else must have collected it from some other place of Himalaya nearby area and gave it to like
and
PW McKinnon, and then he deposited it saying it is from Missouri.
yeah,
So there were two possibilities. So because we could not find it
fascinating.
in like in last 5 years, I was certain it has to be the second option, that it was collected somewhere else, then like given it to PW McKinnon, and then McKinnon deposited it in Natural History Museum London. And then Distant, that like this HW Distant, he described the
Yeah,
species. And me and
yeah.
my colleague and friend, Dr. Navendu Page, who happens to be an expert on plant, who we are doing fieldwork here together. We are just going back from Dhobighat here in Binok
Uh,
and saying, oh, there's this species, nobody have seen it, nobody have any photos, nobody have any clue what it was. And we are just passing. And then there was a landslide, okay, in the month of first week of August. and
Ah,
there was a huge line, and I did not get my motorbike. I was going with him in his car. Then I heard this, like this axle, this truck axle sound. Or sometime when you are passing this Himalayan valley road, there are these stone blocks,
ah,
right? So if you have your windows rolled down, you will hear this sound in
yeah.
interval, zzz, 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 something like that, right? So
Yeah,
that
yeah,
sound came, and we are not even moving because we are stuck. We are stuck in the road. So there's no way, like this sound could come. This sound is vehicle made. So I knew there was a cicada. Okay. So I just got down from the vehicle saying, Navindu, look, this is a cicada, and I think it would be very interesting, and I really want to get this. Okay. So if you think I'm taking too much time and you are holding the traffic, just go ahead. But I need the cicada. Okay. So I went there, I saw the cicada, I spotted it. Okay, and I knew
yeah.
that this would be the cicada, because in the Indian mainland there are only two species of this cicada. Okay, and the second one, the Western Himalayan one, was from Missouri. So I knew this would be the one. Okay, so unfortunately, however, I could not collect it or take a photograph or record the call, anything. Okay, so the next
Oh,
day was a working day. Next day was a working day,
ah,
but this happened to be also a cicada which have a very limited calling period. It starts calling
ah,
sometime at around 6, and it stops somewhere around at 6:25. Okay, and that's it. And it also have a particular
wow.
altitude band. Okay, it would start from a certain elevation and it would end at 5,050 feet. Okay, beyond that is the other big species, the drumming cicada that you are talking. Basically, is the other
Ah,
species that takes the acoustic band. So I
wow.
knew it is restricted
Ah,
in this area. It is restricted in this time. I just happened to be in the right time in the right area. And the second day, we managed to photograph it properly. We managed to record the call properly. We managed to even take a video. Okay, so I was very happy, and that as soon as I went back, I wrote it to Dr. Max Mold, saying, Max, you won't believe we are discussing about this cicada earlier this year, and I just happened to find it. Okay, so then other colleagues of mine, they are also encouraging that I should re-describe the cicada, and the call. The call was never known. Nothing was known. See, the you may ask the question that well, if the cicadas of Dehradun Valley and Mussoorie Hill is so well studied, why doing the study all over again? You're gonna get the same result. That's true, and
yeah,
that's false at the same time. It is studied only the diversity, so we know what species are there. But when it comes to their
yeah.
habitat association, their emergence period, their habitat preference, their host plant, their time of emergence, their time of calling, how is the call look like, we practically know nothing. Okay, as a matter of fact, I was very surprised to know that the call library that I was preparing in 2017 for Garo, Khasi and Jaintia Hills, that happens to be country's first call library on Indian cicadas. Okay, so the Dehradun and
Wow.
Mussoorie would be the country's second. Okay, yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
just
I
one
wish it was
example, but this, yes,
this
yes.
is a
So
we are based in Dehradun, so uh, I
yes,
wish. But anyway, great work, Vivek. Excellent, excellent work.
thank you.
Steve, bye. Steve, I remember one time, if I can remind you, I was at a talk that you had given uh, uh, in Dehradun, and you were remembering those eagles, the steppe eagles that come in and were hanging around that where the offal was, and you gave me one of unconsciously, I think it was, you gave us one of the best descriptions of Dehradun being such a nerve center of of life. I mean, as we know it, of history, life, and with the I remember the list. I mean, FRI, the wildlife, the IMA, everything there. And how. That was where the Survey of India headquarters were, and where if I can remind you, that was a great, really enlightening thing that you had told us all. Seriously, yeah,
Yeah, well, I think it's true. All roads lead to Dehradun, unless they lead to Rome. But I think Dehradun is definitely at the heart of so much of uh, you know colonial history, but then also in terms of the natural history. You have the Wadia Institute. The story of D.N. Wadia himself is a fascinating story of a geologist who was one of the first people to study the geology of the Himalaya. You have so many stories of course, the Survey of India, and whether it's explorers like Nain Singh Rawat being trained in Dehradun and then going across into Tibet. The Forest Research Institute, of course, is a place, and I'm always amazed as I'm doing my research how often Dehradun itself gets mentioned, and whether it's somebody passing through, whether it's somebody who spent time here and did research here. It's really Dehradun's heritage is very, very important, particularly in natural history.
Yeah. And I remember you saying how the Himalayas were not like you just said. It's not like it's an arc, not like a one single barrier, just a barrier, and it arcs over the north of India. And that day you had said, I remember this. It's laser burnt into my memory. Is that you had said that it's like a university, almost of education of how it's range upon range upon range, and each one different from the other, and how yeah, Steve, yeah.
No, I think I've always said the Himalaya is the greatest university on earth, and there's so many different paths of knowledge that you can follow. And I always joke that one of the best things about this university is that there's no administration. It's just students and scholars. But the Himalaya has no president, no chancellor, no deans and committees. We are all free to do exactly what we want when we enter that university.
Yeah. Vivek,
Yeah,
I think
I completely agree with Stephen sir on this.
based
But
in
also
Dehradun.
yes, studying Cicada here, I got introduced to a subject which I never thought I'd be studying. I mean, no offense, but that happens to be history, you know. So
Yeah.
whatever problem we are facing now, all the answers are there in history.
Yeah,
Completely. And Dehradun being that the area of so many institutions, so that has been a major repository of most of the Himalayan flora and fauna. Okay, for an example, the IFRI was in Dehradun, so there is this
yeah.
there's a worker named Ole Branch. Okay, all his collection
Huh.
of North Indian cicadas are actually deposited in IFRI, which is present day FRI. Okay,
Yeah.
and also there is this history timeline that I had to follow very meticulously. For an example, Ole Branch collected here all the specimen and everything till
Yeah.
1830. Okay, so I
Yeah.
know till 1830 the British explorers or other explorers did not really enter in the Masuri Hill and beyond. Okay, they did, but not to that extent. Okay, that happened after 1825 or so.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what happened was all this Ole Branch
Mm.
specimen, which mentioned, and another thing is the type locality and everything, the understanding of that era. The type locality was not mentioned as Dehradun or North India or anything. Most of the time, the type locality was mentioned as Hindustan. So I wrote it at Hindustan. अब future में जो काम करेगा वो ढूंढ लो. It's up to you. So now you have to
The
see who
Hindustan.
all collected, where all. Exactly. So it's like basically deciphering their
Thank you,
historical
Vivek.
accounts.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
So
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much from the
yes,
Valley of Words. It's been a great session. Thank you very, very much, both author Stephen Alter and researcher Vivek Sarkar. And I,
yes.
Ganesh Saili, wish you the best. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.